Greetings, folks. I'm sure you've heard about this. Vice President Kamala Harris has selected Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota to serve on the ticket with her as she campaigns to run for president in November of 2024. Folks, Governor Walz is a man of a certain age, a little bit older than me, a balding white guy, seems to have a real pleasant personality, and he's got some experience as the governor of Minnesota, but there's a lot underneath the surface, and Governor Walz is not just your favorite uncle. He's kind of the uncle that you might want to keep away from certain things when you invite him over to the family reunion and prevent him from talking to your kids about certain crazy ideas he has. Tim Walz is a person who's pulling Kamala Harris, if she wasn't already to the furthest fringes of the left in America. Him serving on the ticket will have a radical progressive, and it seems like every meeting that he's been in Minnesota, whether it was from the riots in 2020 over George Floyd to criminal justice reform to you name it, wrong choice after wrong choice for keeping families safe and protecting our youth. So, folks, you know about us at Family Policy Alliance. We have 41 state organizations out there growing, mobilizing, serving families to advance policy. And one of our most fabulous organizations is Minnesota Family. And we have with us Moses Bratrud with us. He's going to come on here with just a second, and he has seen the policies of Governor Tim Walz up close. So Moses, it's such a privilege to have you guys there in Minnesota. First things first, tell us about your organization and what you're doing in Minnesota. You serve as the Director of Strategy for the organization.
That's right, Craig, and it's really good to be talking with you today. Minnesota Family Council, we've been around for a little bit more than 40 years. And in that time, we've become the largest group serving mostly evangelical Christians devoted to life, family, and religious freedom issues, education, and at the ballot box and in the courts. We're really grateful for our partnership with Family Policy Alliance on the national sphere. And right now, our priority is get people out, get people to vote, and just inform people about the choices they face this November.
So you all have been governed since 2018. That's when Governor Walz ascended to the governorship. Listen, this guy, I can say one thing about him. He's fairly honest. He doesn't try to hide his progressivism much. When he ran for governor, he let people know, what he was. And I think, Moses, a lot of people, maybe they don't believe it. They think that politicians are just pandering to their base when they say things like a Republican might say, I want to eliminate all taxes. Well, how are you going to run a government if you eliminate all taxes? But on the left, this governor said things like he wants abortion to be legal all the way up until you're in the emergency room in labor. And unlike a lot of other Democratic politicians, he did that in Minnesota, didn't he?
That's right. In fact, after the Dobbs decision in 2022, Governor Walz, and this is to the shame of our state here in Minnesota, Governor Walz and the legislature passed a bill which made abortion a right under Minnesota law. That was the first bill they passed in the 2023 legislative session, and we were the first state of the country to do that after Dobbs. And last night when Kamala Harris brought Tim Walz up on the stage, that's one of the things she said as one of the reasons she chose him. And there was a huge line of applause from the audience there in Philadelphia. And so, as you say, Tim Walz is not someone who is hiding his progressive credentials under a bushel. And indeed, although it kind of went against the conventional wisdom, that seems to be why he was chosen by Vice President Harris.
And this is one of the more nuts things to me about this. To a progressive mind, I believe, as I read through Scripture, it talks about when you live away from Jesus, you live away from the vine, of where the truth comes from, your mind can be given over. and people are pursuing these things that are counter to what America stands for, what good and light. I mean, it's literally campaigning to prevent people from being born, for America to have a future is what they're going double down on. But for the people that have been born, this one's interesting to me, Moses. We have data coming in. UL Minnesota Family Council has been a leader on this, along with Family Policy Alliance, since 2017, with this radical gender ideology, which is of the same eugenics camp. Life doesn't matter. You weren't created by God. You're, whatever you can eke out is just basically you should be grateful to the government for giving you that, right? And that is the transgender movement. And interestingly, as Joe Biden was posturing that he was way behind and knew that he had an uphill run, he let the truth come out about a month ago in that transgender surgeries and hormones are not supported by science. They increase the risk of suicide. They have no measurable fruitful outcome for the people, the children that experimented with this. They want to leave it en masse, more than 85%. The UK, Sweden have issued directives, emergency orders, saying this is the most toxic and dangerous thing that you can do to your kids. Emergency order, do not buy these lies. Protect your kids. The White House quietly says, hey, this ain't safe, folks. But Governor Walz, just like Governor Whitmer and these other states, they actually did something that the Biden White House is saying is radical and unsafe for our children, isn't it? And this governor is trying to say he's just somebody's favorite uncle, not that he is going to go do what Sweden and the UK and even the Biden administration is calling radical. Isn't that true?
It's there's that saying, everything which is not forbidden is compulsory, in an authoritarian environment. And so Tim Walz's record on gender issues is shameful, and it's also extremely clear. You can't get around it. He in 2023, he signed a bill. We call it the kidnapping bill. He calls it the trans refuge bill. Folks can choose who they want to believe on that. But in the text of this bill, this could place children in emergency custody of the state if their parents refuse to provide them with so-called gender-affirming care, which, as you pointed out, has no scientific consensus behind it. And so it's something where it's not just that in Minnesota you can provide that to your children, where in other states which have much more sanity about this issue, they have said, no, we're not going to have doctors get ahead of themselves and try to and start prescribing these puberty blockers and these horrifying surgeries to minors, because there's just no scientific support for that, and also it's horrible to do that to a kid. But Tim Walz is saying, actually, if you don't do this as a parent when your child is requesting it and has received some diagnosis from perhaps a quack doctor, if you don't do that, then you are potentially being an abusive parent. And that's just a nightmare scenario for Minnesota parents. And, unfortunately, I don't think that he's going to have to back down from that at all. As he seeks the people's votes this November. He should, but I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think he's even going to be pushed hard enough on this issue, Craig, that he's going to have to say, oh, no, you're right, there is no medical consensus on this. And we think that's one of the most damaging aspects of Tim Walz's legacy as governor here in Minnesota. He caved to the transgender lobby, for lack of a better word, and that's very sad to see. And he needs to take responsibility for that.
He does. He needs to be held accountable, and a coach and a teacher should know better, because every kid going through junior high school and high school is going through something, and they're using something as their solution that's unhealthy. I used alcohol and illegal drugs. Other people use sex, gambling, pornography, you name it. And he knows that a developing kid can be preyed upon by these perverted adults. And he knows that, and he's not acknowledging it. And now he is seeking the second highest office in the land. Thank you for making that clear, Moses. Here's another one. folks. And a lot of our audience has read my bio or my book and stuff. They know I was involved, and I work with Chuck Colson on criminal justice reform. And this is one where people get confused because they'd say, well, Christians, Jesus wanted us to visit the prisoner and support criminal justice reform. What's the difference with what this gentleman did as governor of Minnesota, where he was trying to make sure, was he trying to make sure everybody's life mattered? And for me, I just want to scream it, Moses, you give your take. No, the soft bigotry of lowered expectations is what George W. Bush said. And I believe that to my core. Folks, we've got to hold people accountable for being human. They're created in God's image. And this is a person who, when it comes to abortion, says life doesn't matter. When it comes to a childhood, says your life doesn't matter. And when it comes to the general public, when you are the top executive officer of your state and families' public safety is being threatened, this guy took the side of the now I'm going to use my softer words. I don't like to name people, Moses, because I don't think it's scripturally sound to say you're the criminal, you're the victim, right? It's not. That's how we get away from the way the God would want us to talk about people. But the person causing the harm and the person who's being harmed, you will never see a mayor or a governor or a president take the position of the person causing the harm, ever, until you get to 2020 to 24 for some reason, where Democratic politicians say, I will side with the mob that is hurting families, that is lowering property values, that is destroying businesses and the entire American idea. He did that in Minneapolis, didn't he?
If we go back to 2020, it was a hard time. I don't think any of us who are living here are going to forget that. We could smell the smoke. We could see the boarded up businesses, and that was of course true in many cities. Arguably, Minneapolis, St. Paul was the hardest hit because it started here, and there was a period of time, 3 crucial days after the death of George Floyd, when Tim Walz could have made a decision. The city leaders in Minneapolis, of course, they're initially responsible for handling any type of unrest that's happening in their city. But it became very clear very quickly that it was completely out of their control. Tim Walz publicly said that, but he still waited to make a decision. As governor, you have powers that the mayor of a city or the county government can only dream of, such as sending in the National Guard. People were begging Governor Walz to send in the National Guard, including Senate Majority Leader Gazelka, one of our close allies. So it wasn't just in hindsight, right? The people are saying this. People are saying, why is Governor Walz not calling in the National Guard? After 3 days of dithering, he finally did so, and order was able to be restored. And but as you say, there's during that time period, lawlessness reigned on the streets of Minneapolis and to some extent in St. Paul, and there was untold devastation. And Craig, you know this, the victims of crime are often the poorest and the least privileged people. So when businesses are being destroyed through rioting and looting, yeah, sometimes that's going to be, on Michigan Avenue in Chicago or something. But more often, it's in poor and a majority minority neighborhoods where these businesses that are being destroyed are relied upon by the peace-loving vast majority of that population, right? And so that is unfortunately part of Tim Walz's legacy. These minority-owned businesses, minority neighborhoods being torched because unfortunately, he was unable to make the decision. Representative Tom Emmer, the whip in the U.S. House, he's known Tim Walz for many years, and what he tweeted yesterday is that this shows what kind of leadership Tim Walz showed in a crisis. No leadership, a vacuity of leadership, and right. Unfortunately, we just can't have that in the vice president's office.
Listen, I'm going to take what you just said and I'm going to go further because I've had one of those jobs. I was Speaker of the House in Michigan 20 years ago. And when it got to one of these type of things where Jennifer Granholm was now in Biden's cabinet, and I had to talk at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning about what was going on, we never ever fought. We never ever had any lack of clarity about who we were trying to protect. That's what I'm trying to say here, folks. And when you have a failure, because we had some in cities, and in counties and stuff like that, and guess who bailed them out? You know the answer because you've been listening to the news. Other cities and other counties come to aid, right? When there's a massive fire or there's a riot or the state. What happens when Minneapolis and Minnesota fail and all these people get hurt and everything? There was help available. But when you put somebody in charge of the country and they let Minneapolis go for 3 days countrywide, folks, who's going to come in and help us? Who's going to come in? Who would Tim Walz and Kamala Harris have do that, folks? We can't give away our country to these radical ideologues that care nothing about our Constitution, their own creation, their own life, their own liberty, their own freedoms. They're willing to throw it all away for the control of this government. And Moses, it's a privilege to have you on with us. I'm sorry that that we normally don't talk with this much vigor about our concerns about somebody. And I want to say that for our audience as well. But this is alarming. So I'm going to give you the last question. What are your hopes for Minnesota? What are your hopes for us? We're mobilizing. I know you're working with us. We're working together. Moses, I'll update you right now. We're trying to reach 1 million more Christians that haven't voted in this election, and we're over 300,000 right now. Together,
Wow.
your organization and ours working together. I hope everybody listening to this podcast joins Minnesota Family Council and Family Policy Alliance as we do that. You can come in either way, but if you come in with us as the national organization, we are going to introduce you to the state organization because all politics is local, folks, and you've got to be involved locally before you get involved nationally. We're a different movement. That's how we're set up. We don't do things from D.C. We do them from your kitchen table out, but we need you on our team. We need you to sign up with Minnesota Family Council. There'll be links here on this podcast for all the other states. And in the 9 states we don't have a state, we want you to email us because we want you to get one going, because this is the answer. And folks from Minnesota are going to help us take this wonderful country back to a pro-family, pro-life country, Moses. Tell us how we can do that, how we can help you, and we'll get going together.
Look, Craig, one of the easiest things people can do is to, as you say, get updates from Minnesota Family Council or a state-based family policy group, Family Policy Alliance. And what you're doing when you get that is you're hearing from a Christian voice, not a voice that is motivated by profit or by ideology, like the news media, depending on which one you're talking about. And not some crazy ideologues, or not even people who are running for election, but people whose only incentive essentially is to be the voice of Christians in the public square. That's what Family Policy Alliance does. That's what Minnesota Family Council does. And I want to say something. Many of the things that Governor Walz did in his second term of office would not have been possible if he did not have a 4-seat majority in the Minnesota House and a 1-seat majority in the Minnesota Senate. Half the things that I've just described would not have been possible for him. So now those things are up for re-election this fall. And as Craig said, all politics is local. Your state house district, I know this is true whatever state you live in, your state house district could be the linchpin that decides whether people are able to go in a sane or an insane direction in your state. And that is so crucial. We only have a tiny little deficit, 4 seats in one chamber, 1 seat in the other chamber, that is keeping Minnesota, which seems like such a hard blue state, but actually it's very, very purple. And that's keeping that insanity going. If we can turn that over with your help, we can make progress in this state. That's going to bless everyone. So that's our hope. That's our prayer going into this election cycle.
Thank you, Moses. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for everything you're doing. Folks, we have a link for you, and we want you to click on it. We want you to pray. We want you to vote. We want you to engage. The truth is, evangelical Christians did not participate at a higher percentage than the general public in the 2020 election, and that is what cost the election. So with Christians engaged, our merger We'd make that easy for you to vote safely from home and to take your ballot out of the flow of where it can be manipulated by other people by voting early, safely, by showing up at your city hall. Please click on the link, get registered to vote, share that with your friends. There's more of us than there are of them. And if we have millions of more Christians vote, folks, that changes everything and it helps us answer everything. So God bless you. Thank you again to Moses and Minnesota family for fighting the good fight and sharing that information about their governor, Tim Walz, with us. And we look forward to talking to you all really soon. Thank you again, Moses. God bless you.
Thank you.